Seems like nobody is logging into this yet, so we'll give it a little time and we'll just kind of like chat with each other. My name is Dynasty, and I am one half of Le Maison de Rouge, and this is our weekly Monday Periscope. Thank you everybody for joining so far. I expect maybe a few more people. Hello, Sadly, and your lady's here. But we're just gonna kind of casually meander into our interview today with my special guest. This is Heidi, and Heidi identifies mostly as vanilla, and that might be surprising to some of you.
Adventurous vanilla.
Adventurous vanilla. How could I forget?
That's what I would like to
I'm
be.
so sorry. Because that matters. But Heidi is not a dominatrix in the kink world or in the professional world. She may be a dominatrix in the healing world, but she's not a professional dominatrix. So please respect that. And we would really like it if you could hold your questions until the very end of our interview, our conversation. That way we're not distracted by your demands to see our feet and things like that, as well as your respectful, more legitimate questions, which we will answer.
And we might answer them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. We might answer them through the course of our interview, so just be patient. And so today, what we're going to be talking about centers more on sexual healing and sexual wellness rather than just specifically kink. It would be great if your questions pertain to these topics. I'm not going to make any commands or demands, but that's why we're here today. So Heidi, can you introduce yourself a little more fully for us?
Yes, my name is Heidi Smith, and I am a therapist and herbalist. I have a private practice. It's called Moon and Bloom, and I see people in the city and in Brooklyn. I focus on psychospiritual healing, and I'm trained as a mental health counselor, but I also spent a number of years studying with a healer named Jane Bell, studying ancient Egyptian mysticism and the divine feminine, and a modality called focusing, which is a type of somatic integrative work.
That sounds really fascinating, actually, focusing. I would like to hear a little bit more about that, but I'm going to turn that off because I just realized that it's loud. Sorry, guys.
We need to keep it cool in here.
Yes, because we are some hot ladies. And we're drinking some hot tea.
I made us some herbal tea.
Tell us again what's in this tea.
Tonight we're drinking Damiana, chamomile, and linden. And Damiana is a really beautiful aphrodisiac antidepressant herb that I put in a lot of things, actually. It brings a lot of the energy down.
Mm-hmm. Down into your lower chakras?
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. It's very grounding.
Hi, Caesar. Okay. Okay, so should I ask you about focusing now, or should we wait until a little later?
Yeah, maybe when we start talking about more like the benefits of sexual healing and how it plays into that, and like I wanted to talk a little bit about the second chakra.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I get really excited about these new things.
Yes. So much overlap in our worlds.
So, and how long have you been doing all this wonderful work?
I've been in private practice for about 3 years now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm very honored to be doing this work. And recently I started working with a woman named Juliet Haynes, and she is a sexual awakening facilitator. And that work has been really transformative. Mm-hmm. And that was around the time that I met you, which was so fortuitous.
Yes.
Because I'd been really curious to get more involved in sex worker advocacy, and very curious to know more about BDSM, because I feel like like mental health, there's just so much shame around sex. It's so stigmatized and so pathologized.
Yes. So how do you think that this new endeavor that you're focusing on is going to help, like, how does healing sexuality help heal the rest of our lives?
Yeah, great question. Well, I find that there's many ways in to healing and waking up. I consider myself a guide to helping people wake up, and I'm on the path of waking up. And I think sex and sacred sexuality are another way to do that. So, should we try to speak a little louder?
Yeah, a little bit louder.
Okay.
You're so soft-spoken, and the microphone is on this side.
Okay, I will try to speak louder. Thank you. Yes, so how does healing our own sexuality heal other people and heal everyone? So I find that healing is a quantum experience. I don't think that we heal in a vacuum. And when we heal our own fields, we heal the field around us.
Okay. So quantum meaning?
I'm using the word quantum to mean that it's not just happening for us. It's like creating like a quantum exponential
like vibrations that ripple throughout time and space.
That's right. Exactly. Thank you.
I got it right.
Yes. And taking it a step further, like when we come together to have a conversation, we're not just two people, the sum of our parts. We're creating like infinite ripples of change. And so that's why I think coming together and circling in these conversations is so empowering.
And that in and of itself is a form of sex, because you're bringing two parts together, and the third thing that comes out of it is larger than the sum of its parts, which I think in a lot of forms, like creation is that.
Wow. Yes, I totally agree. I think about the healing field. I think about, like, if I'm working with a client, the alchemy that we have together, we're creating our own field, and that is like a sexual creation, act of union. Yeah, that's really
alchemy
beautiful.
is a good word for it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so important, because I think like many people grow up with this very limited definition and view of what sex is and what sex can be, and a lot of people are very genitally focused, and I think that can be, of course, very pleasurable and fulfilling, but it's also only one dimension of sex. And if you bring in all the other factors that could possibly make some kind of effect or matter to you, like some people, you know, they really enjoy certain sensations that happen on other parts of their body and not just genitally. And so I think that, you know, these kinds of things, bringing them in and making your sex even more fulfilling and rich.
Yes, and bringing in the emotional component of that. And actually, that's a question I had for you. Is this a good time to ask you about how you define psychosexual healing in your work?
Yeah.
I'm very curious.
So I think that let me just look at my notes super quickly. Psychosexual healing in BDSM. Well, BDSM, in my opinion, is already inherently psychosexual. Yeah. Because so many of the activities and ideas are not genitally focused, and also they happen in your mind first. Like, you have these fantasies about possibly having an experience where it's not just like two people coming together and joining genitals, you know. So it's like the psychology of BDSM is already almost like overarching the act itself. And then psychosexual healing happens when there is a safe space and a container for it to happen in. It's not something that just like, you know, is like thrown out everywhere I go. And so by allowing somebody to come in and performing these almost like ritualistic aspects of BDSM, first of all, there's negotiation, and then there's a lot of times some kind of protocol, which can be ritualistic, where you know, maybe somebody puts themselves in a headspace by bowing down on the floor, or crouching down on the floor, and kind of like that's the space that you begin opening this container with. Mm-hmm. And then allowing also for the person who is having this experience and being able for me to facilitate it, to still let them have a way out or a way to stop the thing that's happening by giving them a safe word. And so that kind of empowerment is really important when you're dealing with trauma victims.
Yeah, totally.
And people who are looking to maybe their healing process involves reenacting their trauma, but within a safe space with somebody that respects their and honors their trauma. And then
that's so awesome that you have the opportunity to work on that level. Wow.
Yeah, and it is so rewarding because the effects, they're not something that's like immediately afterward this transformation happens. It slowly happens over time, and the more somebody's able to process what they've just been through, the more it's like the deeper they get into their own psychology of it.
Yeah, the deeper they can go on the journey. Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you is that safety is really paramount.
Safety and privacy, and those are also like walls of the container. Mm-hmm. Privacy being that they know that this is only happening between the two of us, and I'm not like recording it or letting my friends watch or something, unless that is indeed the fantasy. And then the safety of always knowing that the dominant is going to care for the submissive or the bottom no matter what happens. So there's aftercare where everything is, after the container, the experience is over and the container closes, you come back to the ground, you come and ground yourselves together, and then you can process it later, or you can process it together.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually is very similar to how I work with people with focusing as well. Mm-hmm. Creating a safe space to kind of go in and have this inward experience that's client-driven, client-guided. Mm-hmm. And then, the grounding afterward is really important because it can get so expansive, right? And you can really go far out there. That's interesting.
Yeah, so let's see. So let's talk about maybe the current, I guess, situations in our lives right now, which involve the patriarchy and the idea of kind of like a very male-centric sexual agenda, and how that harms us and what we can do about it.
Sure. So I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. I kind of conceptualize everything around how the patriarchy is affecting us, because I think that's the general consciousness that we live in. And I'm of the belief that most of our self-limiting beliefs actually are connected to the patriarchy. And so it's unfortunately how we're programmed. And I am really interested in helping people have deep, lasting transformation. And the way that I know how to do that is to address belief systems, because no matter, if you're coming to me and you're feeling anxious, I can tell you a bunch of herbs that you can take for anxiety. But if you feel like you're not worthy of feeling better, because I think that unworthiness and the shame is something that is so ingrained in all of us, then it's only going to take you so far.
Yeah. So addressing the problem at the root, at the source, not just the symptoms.
Right. So how are we affected by these oppressive belief systems? The white supremacy, the misogyny. It's really based around fear. It's a fear consciousness. And it's a complete lack of sacred sexuality. So it's not connected to the sacred sexual at all.
Can you tell us a little more about what the sacred sexual is?
Sure. So at one point in time, we were connected to divinity. There was no separation between person and spirit. And I learned this in part when I was studying ancient Egyptian mysticism, because it is an example of a matriarchal and patriarchally balanced society, which is really unusual.
Yeah, it's so fascinating.
Mm-hmm. There's probably many more, but that's as far back as we know our history goes.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I just recently wrote a little article about this on my website. My practice, did I mention my practice is called Moon and Bloom? I can't remember. My practice is called Moon and Bloom, and I recently wrote an article on sexual wellness that's on my blog. And I was thinking about looking at how sex is shameful, and that's more of a modern association, versus sex is sacred, which is connected to more ancient wisdom. And some other characteristics are that it involves an equal power distribution. Children receive appropriate sex education and supportive resources. Sex can be used to empower and heal versus manipulate and control. It's energizing the entire chakral system, whereas if you're into there's a love or sex addiction, it's more of a lower chakral compulsion, and it can be really depleting to the system.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cosmic union with yourself, with your partners, and with the divine. It's not just some external objectified experience. It's not self-gratifying, it's mutually beneficial. And it's celebrating all genders, gender non-binary. It's not just reinforcing the binary and male dominance. It's not just glorifying male prowess and ejaculation, but it's honoring that union.
Mm-hmm.
And it's healing on all levels: physical, emotional, spiritual, subtle. It's not just creating an over-attachment to the physical body.
Okay.
So those are kind of the some of the differences that were coming up for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And I was just reading a part of something that you wrote in your blog. So there were these temple priestesses in ancient Egypt, and they were essentially sex workers.
Yeah.
Like, they were paid in some way, not necessarily with money, right? But worshipped or been giving offerings to, where they inhabited a sacred space of religiousness and spirituality, and they were revered, and they weren't cast out or stigmatized because they had sex with people that weren't necessarily in relationship to them.
Exactly. Yes.
And
There was
that's
no difference between priestess and prostitute in the ancient world.
Yes.
And when we're talking about ancient Egyptian mysticism, we're talking like pre-pharaonic Egypt, so way back.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means.
Really long time ago.
Yeah, that's amazing though. So, I mean, how would you, in a practical way, go about, I guess, like, helping other people get to the sacred divine?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's certainly something that I'm doing in my own, that I have been doing in my own work for many years. Not specifically around the sexual, so that's this new branch of study that I feel guided to explore right now. But I think the first step for me in working with people in reclaiming and helping people reclaim their divine natures is to recognize where you have the opportunity to make different choices about how, what you're participating in. So,
informed choices that maybe you can learn about through exploration or research, or if you find that your desires are unconventional, you can always see a professional too.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, I think that in terms of like creating a safe space for that to happen, it is really important to talk about it. And I mean, frankly, it's not that comfortable for me to be on camera talking about sex, but I'm doing it because, you know, I have a lot of privilege and I have a voice and I have experience, and I want to try and create more of a sex positive environment for these conversations to happen. So, you know, maybe it helps someone else feel more comfortable. And just bringing that up and naming that. I think naming is a really powerful spellbinder. Sometimes just naming something can shift the energy around it completely.
Very true. I find that in my life, even when it doesn't have to do with sex, finding out this thing that didn't have borders and then naming it so that you're defining it, so that you can put borders around it. Because if it's one thing, then it's not the other. And then being able to almost like see it,
and then you can kind of work with it.
Yeah. Or just kind of like swat it away.
Or get rid of it.
So do you think that through your practice you've witnessed any sort of I guess sexual awakenings or alternative sexualities being more accepted? Anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think people are really curious about sexual awakening. Like, what is it? Do I even need help? What does that mean? I'll get back to like alternative sexualities in a second. But I think I'd say most 70% of the people that come to see me are female identified, and I guess the sex questions, the sex inquiries that come up are mostly around like, is this normal? Is this okay? And I'm not a sex therapist. That's not like my specialty, but I certainly feel comfortable holding space for exploring that terrain with people.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Sorry, what was your question again? It was like how to like.
Is it the sexual or the sexual awakenings are?
Oh, right.
Kind of being more accepted as a form of healing and a place that people need healing.
Yes, I think definitely it's more. I mean, how awesome that we're like here right now, just having this conversation. I mean, I don't think that this would have happened 20 years ago.
Definitely not.
And it's still not. It still wouldn't be safe to do in a lot of parts of the world. So, yeah, I think that is shifted a lot. Definitely more women are coming to me wanting to have better sex and have more orgasms and, question if what they're wanting to do is okay and normal, and are there resources to connect them. There's an amazing woman that I met recently. Her name's Kimberly Ann Johnson, and she's a sexological body worker. Are you familiar with that kind of work?
No. Can you tell us more about it?
I haven't had a session with her. I really want to. Her sessions sell out. She's based in LA, but she comes here to teach and see clients. And she wrote a book called The Fourth Trimester, which I really recommend for new moms, new parents. And she actually works vaginally. So it's a really hands-on way to go in and work with any kind of trauma or just to get to know yourself better.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to say about embodied work. And I think that even though talk therapy is extremely important and highly helpful and effective for a lot of people, being able to experience healing in a bodily way is also, it's hard to separate the two. Like, you're one thing that's completely integrated. And so when you're only working with the mind, sometimes there can be like a dissonance between what's going on in the mind and what's going on in the body. And so with what I do, the psychosexual part of BDSM and BDSM healing is super important because the breath is what connects it. And a lot of times breathing is what will help somebody kind of release or somebody understand themselves a little better.
So you're working with the breath.
I'm working with the breath, working with the body. Yeah, and it's not like complicated at all. It's more just about breathing through a situation that might be triggering, or breathing through a situation that makes you feel like you are at your limit, but the body can actually handle a lot more than sometimes the mind allows.
Yeah, and that's similar to what I do with the focusing. So because I'm of a similar belief as you, is I think that talking about things can be really helpful and supportive, but I also feel like we're all so mental already. We're spending so much time up here that there can actually be like an over-attachment to the intellectualization and the storytelling, and there is a way to tap into the felt sense and to the heart and to the sex organs. You can actually, set up a dialogue with these parts of yourself, and so that's kind of what I do with the focusing. And I find that everything that I'm always learning and taking classes, and everything that I learn, I always come back to the focusing because it's super non-dogmatic and anybody can learn how to do it. And as Freud said, the mind lies, but the body never lies. So I don't agree with all of that.
Okay. I was just gonna say, but he had
some things going.
He had some interesting theories for sure that I think are still kind of being tested. But are you okay? So I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought real quick. So there's this idea that was brought up in one of your blog posts, actually, called the Women's Union.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to hear a little more about that.
Yes. Okay. So the woman I'm working with, Juliet Haynes, she studied with this other woman named Dr. Shakti Milan, and she is a South African woman who's also an anthropologist, and she coined this term, the Women's Union. And the Women's Union is this concept that it essentially represents the shadow archetype of the feminine.
Oh, okay.
So it is it's like where the virgin horse split gets manifested, and it's how people take their own power away from their sexuality. So it's like and we all do this because it's internalized. So it's the judgment, it's the criticism. If you see somebody walking down the street and they're wearing a short skirt and you say, oh, that person's asking for it or something, it's keeping everybody, yeah, right? We've all been there. I remember feeling this from a very young age. And the idea is that this is internalized, so we are participating in this. It has to do with shame, and where do we get to be more free? Where do we get to have, I think women are a lot, and people are brought up to be in competition with each other.
That's for sure.
And that's really unfortunate because that is another aspect of the patriarchy. Yeah. Where people are pitted against one another, this scarcity mentality, more for you is less for me, when the other reality is that it's more for everybody. And so a question I try to ask myself regularly is, where do we get to be in connection instead of competition with people? Where do we get to elevate everybody together?
Yes. And that is having to look past our differences. And I think that one of the things that's coming up that's a symptom to what you're just talking about is SESTA and FOSTA.
Yes.
Which I know that you're probably tired of listening to this, or maybe you haven't heard enough about it, but let me just go in and briefly describe that SESTA and FOSTA are bills that have been passed into law and will go into effect very soon, that are under the guise of stop sex trafficking and fight online trafficking, sex trafficking. And so these bills, what they aim to do has actually nothing to do with sex trafficking. It has everything to do with censorship and abolishing sex work, both online and offline. So what it's done is divided people even more. And there's already this enormous cultural stigma against sex workers, but there's also all these other smaller groups of people that are being disenfranchised and disempowered through government systems. And unfortunately, we're kind of the bottom of the barrel. So even if you're a marginalized community, a lot of times, you know, you're still kind of like, oh, sex work is gross, you know. And so that's one of the things that actually I think would be good to talk about is that there are so many negative assumptions about sex and kink work. It's always seen as something outside of your own morality a lot of times, and that exchanging sex for a dinner is okay, but exchanging sex for a set dollar amount with somebody who does it normally is gross. And the thing that that hurts sex workers is this idea that we're not human, you know, that we're subhuman and we're
or
like
that you don't have a choice, like you're doing it because you're traumatized and you don't have a choice and you're powerless.
Yeah. And you know, unfortunately, a lot of people have been through sexual trauma, and in a lot of ways they choose sex work because it gives them
But it's an empowered choice.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
it's an empowered choice. I mean, that's like a sliver of the demographic of sex workers. A lot of us haven't been through sexual trauma or have been through sexual trauma and also have held other jobs that we found to be maybe halfway satisfying, but then we choose sex work because we realize how awesome it is. And so the government is basically trying to take that away, and our ability to connect with each other, to hold safe communities and to connect in case there's like vetting needed. And it also is basically trying to strike every occurrence of online advertising when it has to do with sex work. And so you know, this is not sex trafficking. This is a different thing. Sex work is not sex trafficking.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on right now, and we are all pushing for decriminalization, because legalization would make it so that the government was all up in our business all the time and trying to regulate things that, you know, are not able to be regulated. And so criminalization harms us, but decriminalization would be ideal.
Okay. And what's the status on that?
The status is just that it's, you know, it's kind of been passed, but the only thing that's really happening are that these online platforms that are kind of the target are self-censoring. So nobody has been fined and nobody has gone under. There have just been mostly websites that have shut down or shut down parts of themselves in the name of self-censoring and, you know, like preserving their business. And also there have been a string of other bills that have gone in that also are kind of like riding on the coattails of SESTA and FOSTA. One of them is to make banking illegal for sex workers. Yeah. And then the other is to expand the idea of pandering and loitering, so that anybody trying to advocate for like or help with distribution of materials for harm reduction, like condoms or pamphlets, are being held, or that would be like illegal or, you know, criminalized as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate sign of the time, and don't you feel like it really goes back to that shame?
Yes.
Like there's so much shame about it, and it's so arbitrary that this is the belief system that we've been indoctrinated into.
Yeah, and it keeps perpetuating shame because a lot of it is just trying to, you know, get swept under the rug and make it all go away, and that doesn't help shame. That in fact bolsters shame. So Having this conversation with you, I think, is really important because we're able to dispel the shame of talking about sex, which is still kind of like not done in, like sex education in schools basically doesn't exist.
It's awful.
Yeah. It's like a scare tactic. It's like, don't get syphilis. Here's what it looks like.
Oh, try going to Catholic school. It's a nightmare.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Oh, my God. I mean, unfortunately, I do not think that, it wasn't all terrible, but in terms of my sexual development, I don't think that a Catholic education was very supportive to me at all. I learned that if you masturbate, you're going to hell. If you have premarital sex, you're going to hell. Men are better than women, and women are responsible for the downfall of humanity. I mean, that's a pretty heavy conditioning to put on a kid. Yeah. That's not particularly helpful.
Well, Christianity is definitely the part of our civilization where everything kind of took a turn.
Yeah, it's true.
Like a major turn. Like many people died. In fact, more people died for Jesus Christ than all the wars combined, I think.
Really?
I think I read that statistic somewhere, which is ridiculous.
And I think Jesus was an awake dude. Yeah. For sure.
I mean, his best friend was a whore.
There's a major difference. Oh, yeah. Are we talking about Mary?
Yes, we are.
Magdalene?
Yes.
I am so curious about her.
Yeah, there's a lot of literature on her, and I think that there's, in fact, like whole graduate, what are they called?
Program.
Thesis. Yeah.
Theses?
Yeah, theses. Which rhymes with feces. About her.
Yeah, Mary Magdalene and Isis, goddess Isis from Egypt. I think there's some overlap there.
And maybe even Lilith.
And Lilith, yes.
Who's
definitely.
One of my favorite feminist badass archetypes.
Love her.
Yeah. So, do you know anything about Lilith?
Lilith was the original Eve, and so she was actually. This is what I know about Lilith. So she was made of earth, as opposed to Adam's rib,
right?
And then Adam wanted Lilith to lie under her, and she said no, and so she just split. And
she refused to be sexually dominated by a man.
So then she left, and she was essentially villainized and turned into a demon.
Right. And people called her the baby-eating demon.
Yes, that's right. A screech owl or something. And a lot of people in the New Age milieu feel that she is actually coming back. And there's like an astrological component to this as well.
Oh, yes.
Because it's represented by a point in space. That I don't know a lot about that, but it's like the feminine rising. There's a return happening.
That is definitely happening. Yeah, I feel that very, very strongly, and I feel that with all the gatherings of females that have been happening lately, and
gather in the tribes.
Yeah, and the uptick of like feminist talk and revisiting certain feminist ideas and kind of refining them and redefining. Like there are feminists, first wave, second wave, third wave. I don't know. Are we on the fourth wave?
Are we in?
I think we're on the fourth. Or four is my lucky number. Maybe I don't know. So feminism now, like newer feminism, is more inclusive.
Yes.
And
needs to be.
Yeah, and I mean personally, I am maybe fifth wave because I'm more of a female supremacist, and take that could be a whole different topic. Take what you will from that label, but it's really about creating an end to where the pendulum swings, because like we're kind of on the patriarchy consciousness right now. Well, how do we find the middle if we don't find where it ends first, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's more about. I feel like that's more about integration.
Yeah.
Not so much like one person having more power than the other.
No, and it's really like it's not about. I think female supremacy is kind of a misleading term. Actually, I think that Also, it's a fun fantasy to think about, but it's also not necessarily just fantasy based. You know, it's not just sexual women keeping men in cages until we need them kind of thing. It's really about finding the balance, but first kind of like finding where the opposite of patriarchy is.
Yes. So there needs to be a rising happening.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah. So, do you have any advice for how we can heal ourselves sexually?
Yes. So, where did I put that in my notes here?
We are answering questions at the end of our conversation because we just might answer your questions before we get to the end. So if you can hold all your questions until the very end, that would be really great.
Okay. So healing your sexuality, where to start? It's a huge topic. I think a lot of people aren't necessarily even sure that there's anything to explore there. It could be, but I think a good place to start is to assess your safety level and just to know what feels safe for you. And so I find that it's really helpful working with people to get a sense of where they are and how they're saying in their relationship to saying no. So if you're familiar with how the chakral system develops, so the chakra system is the energy centers that can correspond more contemporarily with the endocrine system, and they develop in tandem in childhood. And so the second chakra, which is located just below the navel, that is connected to the sex organs, and it goes online when a child learns how to say no. And this is how a child learns to discern the difference between their own needs and the needs of someone else. So it's that relationship to self and relationship to other. And if you were not brought up in an environment where you were taught how to do that or that was modeled for you, then you might have, or you were a victim of some trauma, then you may never learn to say no. A conscious no. Right,
and sometimes it's more than just not saying no. It's like not having your no respected.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So it's always a good idea to go in and to be aware of where are you working on that level, because I find people with inquiries around sex and love and relationship, there's usually some correspondence to not feeling safe to say no and know the boundaries with that. So I feel like that's a really good place to start. And then I think it's helpful to think about, like, what do you want to get out of sexual healing and sexual wellness? Is it something physiological? You know, it could be something as like a low libido situation or erectile dysfunction or a lack of, infertility issues. It could be after you have a child and you're having trouble feeling in the mood, or it's a physical issue for you, and a lot of times I refer people out to get Mayan abdominal massage. Have you heard of that?
I think I've actually had one.
Oh yeah.
Without actually knowing that was going to happen, and it was amazing.
Isn't it?
Yes, it really is.
And I feel like everyone should have it.
I would like to ask you if you know of any practitioners in New York.
I do.
Okay, good.
Do you want me to say her name?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Her name is Liza Rockel, and she is the best.
How do you spell her last name?
It's Roeckl.
Okay.
Liza Rockel, and she practices out of a naturopath's, Remed Naturopathics, which is in the Village.
Okay.
And she is phenomenal. She is trained as a therapist like myself, but she's also a very talented practitioner, so I definitely recommend her services.
Mayan abdominal massage.
Arvigo Mayan abdominal massage.
Arvigo. Okay. Is that a special brand?
Yes, it is. It is. Yes. I don't know. I can't say any more.
That's
about
good
that,
enough.
Okay. So there's that, and then there's your herbs for your aphrodisiac herbs, which can be really helpful. I think low libido is such an interesting topic. It's still really taboo. It's something that I talked a little bit about in the blog post that I wrote about last week. And that can get a little more complicated because it is involving the entire endocrine system. And as in, in New York, most of us have some kind of endocrine disruption given the stressful environments that we're living in.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that people's libidos are affected.
Yeah, because stress is definitely one of the major, I guess, like dampeners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are on medications, and that can be a side effect. And
Yeah. So, sexual healing. So these are some of your, I guess, suggestions as to how we can address them from a more herbal and
holistic. More holistic perspective. And I listed actually a bunch of resources on my website.
Yes.
Just other places that you might be interested to check out. And there's actually, when I was listening to some of your other Periscopes, there was a woman you interviewed here. Her name was Aisha, I believe. I think Lucy interviewed her, and she's located out in San Francisco, and she's a sex coach. And I don't know that many people doing that work. So,
why can't I think about this?
I think it was like
Maisha.
Maisha.
Yes. She has a really great podcast called Down for Whatever.
Yeah.
And you can hear about some of her, Maisha Battle is her name. And you can hear about some of her techniques and some of her cases. And she is also archived in our Periscope interviews. So if you go backward into our Periscope catalog, you can find it. So as far as sexual healing within a kink context, I've had some really amazing experiences with people that I will call my clients, even though they're submissive identified for the most part. And they tend to be, as far as the clients that I draw, tend to be cisgendered white males in the, let's say, 45 to 60 category age range. And some of them have discovered this need for something in their lives that isn't fulfilled by like talk therapy, or isn't necessarily something that they even realized like consciously that was necessary for their own healing. And so I have one client who has come, and we engaged in a lot of different role plays where it was lighthearted and fun. And then I was kind of like, there has to be something deeper than this, like going on, because I'm always a little bit of an instigator. So within the safe space that I created for him, he was able to make a confession to me that he had never confessed to anybody else in his life about a sexual a traumatic sexual event that happened in his childhood. And upon releasing that verbally, he was able to, I guess, like, focus on it, put a name to it, and then able to connect other dots that have happened in his life in the past that kind of surround this event, and the healing that he needed to do just basically by releasing it and forgiving. Because there wasn't a whole lot that he could do, but he was holding it all inside and very, very shameful.
He did that all in one session?
No, this was over many sessions.
Yeah, I was like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, the whole process usually takes like several sessions, and of course, like, the role play we would do was also the kind of initiation into the deeper psychological work. Because after a while he knew that he was safe, and he knew that he was in a place where he could like let his guard down and not always have to play the role of like alpha male, because our role play specifically had to do with like James Bond. And you can just imagine the rest. And I also had this really important moment with another client who realized early on in his kink explorations that there was a need for him to feel safe and to be held in like a compression way. And that was because he, in his early, like when he was born, his mother had postpartum depression. And so she was unable to connect to him and to bond with him. And so he was basically brought up by somebody else and not his mom. And there was a lot of neglect, and there was a lot of kind of like dismissal, like even though you're a baby, your needs are not as important as mine, type of thing. And so the last time he felt safe in this world was when he was in the womb. So the bondage and the compression and like being inside of something safely and feeling it all around, all over the place, was his way of dealing with the traumatic, I guess, like non-bonding of him and his mother. And so I think it's really fascinating because yes, we all have some dark sides, and I think the willingness to go into those shadow areas of our lives is where the healing actually happens. Absolutely. Cool. So do you have any promotional things that you would like to tell us about, or any upcoming projects or anything?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
So let's see. I have a class that I'm teaching up in Catterskill, New York. It's going to be health and mental wellness. Herbs and mental wellness. Sorry. Herbs and mental wellness. I really love teaching this class. I get into a lot of like the patriarchy and belief systems. So that's on my website, and that's July 29th. And then I'm hopefully going to be hosting my teacher Juliet Haynes for a sexual awakening workshop that's going to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That is TBD. We're trying to find a place for it the weekend of August 26th, I believe, somewhere here in New York or Brooklyn. And this coming fall, I'm opening up a retail shop at Juniper where I practice in Brooklyn. And it's going to be products by all women, for all women, wellness, more so emotional and reproductive care. So that's pretty cool.
That is really great.
Yeah.
I would love to support that. So it's an actual physical retail space. And are you going to be selling your own, are you going to make it? Yeah, your own medicines?
Yeah, I am.
So I know you do flower essences.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I work with flower essences in my practice. So yeah, I will be selling some of my own products, but we're also going to be supporting as many local producers and artisans as we can as well.
Awesome. So for anybody that had questions, now would be a good time to ask. And while you're texting it out, I wanted to let Heidi tell you about how to reach her.
Oh, okay, sure. Probably the easiest way would just be email. And my email address, well, actually, maybe no. Maybe I won't give you my email address.
Yeah,
I'm so naive. I'm like, what? Let's go to my website.
Yes, go to her website.
moonandbloom.com.
Moonandbloom.com. Do you guide men as well?
I do. I work with all genders, gender non-binary, for sure. I'd say that 70% of my clientele are women identified.
Okay.
So again, my website is moonandbloom.com.
Moon is, yes,
moon, like moon in the sky.
Yeah, the
moon
and
bloom.com.
Yes, very good. I think that was a very good call. Seeing as there are many trollish people that wanted to know more about you, um, in case you guys didn't realize that this is an interview and we're not here to perform anything, moonandbloom.com.
Yeah, you got it.
Yes.
You got it.
It's the word "and" spelled
No
out.
ampersands.
Right.
Squarespace
So
will let you do an ampersand.
Beantown Slave Boy got it. Beantown Slave Boy, you get a gold star
Thanks,
for today.
Beantown.
And so if there's more questions, we'll be here for a couple more minutes. And if not, then I just wanted to maybe let you guys know that I'll be slightly less available starting July, early July. Thoughts on veganism? No thoughts on veganism for me.
That's another show.
Yeah. I'm going to be taking a series of instructional courses that will add to my toolbox of kinky healing, basically. And so I'm calling it Summer School, and it's going to be Ericksonian hypnosis and Reiki, and then yoga teacher training.
Beautiful.
So I'm really excited about this. Yeah, and since there's no other questions, I want to thank all of you for being super polite and for tuning in. And have you heard of Gerson therapy? Yes. No. Gerson therapy is the concept of eating alkaline and reviving your body's ability to create new cells. And apparently it's very effective for cancer patients. It also involves coffee enemas.
Oh.
Yeah, so thanks again for tuning in.
Thank you.
And we will see you next week.
Bye.